the world at large. Meanwhile, the Nigeria Super Eagles have expressed disappointment over their defeat at the 2023 CAF African Cup of Nations final. The Elephants of Cote d'Ivoire won the 2023 CAF African Cup of Nations final. The Ivorians saw off the Super Eagles of Nigeria in a tense 2-1 defeat. Two strikes from Frank Kessie and Sebastian Haller were enough to cancel Trust Ekong's opener. And prior to the game, the Super Eagles players and officials were confident that Nigeria would be crowned kings of Africa. But reacting to their loss in an X tweet on Monday, the Eagles said even though they feel disappointed, they will cherish the silver medal they won. And away from AFCON now, let's talk other matters where President Bola Tinubu has said his administration was keen to make Nigeria self-sufficient in food production and become a net exporter of agricultural products through what he called aggressive mechanization. He affirmed his administration's support to give ease and succor to the 2024 Hajj pilgrims. In a statement signed by his special advisor on media and publicity, Ajuri Ngelale, Tinubu emphasized the importance of spiritual endeavors in nation building, vowing to support religious activities. The statement was titled, President Tinubu, we are determined to achieve food sufficiency for Nigeria. He also outlined plans to bolster agricultural productivity through various initiatives, including the expansion of farmlands, the provision of low-interest loans to farmers, and significant investments in irrigation infrastructure. Former Governor of Central Bank of Nigeria, Mohammed Sanusi, has said it is an injustice to blame the administration of President Bola Tinubu for the current economic hardship the country is facing. Sanusi said the country is battling a failing economy due to mismanaged economic policies of the past 8 years. Sanusi, who stated this while speaking virtually at a religious event in Abuja, said he would not join those who are hell-bent on criticizing Tinubu over the current economic challenges in the country. According to him, Tinubu's decision to remove fuel subsidy should be applauded. In the meantime, the two leading opposition parties have called on the federal government to make good its promise to release 102,000 metric tons of assorted grains as a short-term measure to address the food crisis in the country. According to media reports, the leadership of both the Labour Party and the People's Democratic Party had, in separate interviews, urged the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu-led administration to redeem itself by following through on its promises, noting that the government had failed to keep previous promises. The federal government had last Wednesday or Thursday announced plans to release 42,000 metric tons of maize, millet, gari, and other commodities from the National Strategic Grain Reserve. The Minister of Information and National Orientation, Idris Muhammad, who disclosed this, said the federal government also reached an agreement with the Rice Millers Association of Nigeria to release 60,000 metric tons of rice. Right, you're watching news analysis live on Politics and Business TV. Still to come, National Association of Nigerian Students, NANS, calls on the federal government to take immediate steps to prevent hike in tuition fees. This and more after the break. Join us again. Prioritize their safety and well-being while expressing affection during Valentine's season. The agency said this in a statement signed by the head of the Public Relations and Protocol Unit of the agency, Tony Aderi Bigbe, ahead of Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day is celebrated annually on February 14th to share love and gifts. The Director General of NACA, Dr. Gambo Aliyu, said, as people celebrate love on Valentine's Day, we want everybody to enjoy it while prioritizing their well-being. He also urged the general public to incorporate protection into intimate moments, undergo regular HIV testing, and engage in conversations about sexual health with their partners. And now to other matters. A group under the aegis of Politics&Analytics, a Nigerian-based think tank and economic research organization, has urged the governor of Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, Dr. Yemi Cardoso, to follow through with its latest monetary policy reforms as against previous efforts that were abandoned halfway. This was contained in a press statement signed by the group's lead researcher and policy analyst, Adefolarin Olamilekon, and made available to Politics and Business News over the weekend in Abuja. The statement highlighted key issues affecting the nation's foreign exchange market, to include lack of transparency, policy reversal, insider abuse, and political economy pressure, come rent-seeking that characterizes corny financial capitalists. It further posited that if these impediments are not addressed, it could erode investors' confidence, block capital inflow, and foreign exchange would be scarce. Now to education matters, where the National Association of Nigerian Students, NANS, has called on the federal government to take immediate steps to prevent fee increases and unfair policies in tertiary institutions in the country. Well, this came as it expressed concerns over the decision of the management of Michael Okpara University of Agriculture, Umudike, to withhold examination from students who have not fully paid their school fees, describing the development as worrisome given the current financial challenges of Nigerians. The Nigerian Student Umbrella Body, in a statement by its president, Lucky Emonefe, urged the university management of Michael Okpara University of Agriculture, Umudike, to reconsider their decision and find alternative solutions that do not discriminate against students based on their financial status. NANS particularly called on the Minister of Education to intervene in this matter and ensure that all tertiary institutions in the country adhere to fair and inclusive policies regarding school fees and exams. This development is despite President Bola Tinubu's directive that Nigerian public universities should desist from increasing the fees payable by students arbitrarily. According to a media report, Tinubu had, in a short statement in July last year, directed the federal government-owned tertiary institutions against arbitrary increases in fees payable, insisting tuition fees or remains free in the institutions. Now, joining us to discuss this is a lecturer and public affairs analyst, Dr. Adejo Sunday. He joins us live via telephone to discuss this. Good afternoon to you, Doc. Thank you so much for joining us. Conversation, one would say, is long overdue. You are a lecturer and also a public affairs analyst, but for the fact that you're a lecturer, one would say that you know these things better, how things are done across these, places of learning. The question now is, how much more will Nigerians have to pay for education?
Well, generally, education is not expensive in the sense that if one says education is expensive, then the person will need to try ignorance. However, if you look at the general political system, there's inflation everywhere. So it's not something that is peculiar to the educational system or to the educational sector. One must take a holistic look at our society in relation to the contemporary development within our society. There's inflation, there's food inflation, inflation in goods and services, and so the educational system cannot be left out of all this equation. However, yes, we understand that we are in a country where a lot of people struggle to go to school, and as such, education should be affordable for children of the poor, especially in public universities or public tertiary institutions or public primary and secondary schools, as the case may be. However, what we have noticed over time is the astronomical increase in school fees by vice chancellors, by rectors and provosts of colleges of education and all of that, which is not the way to go. A little, reverse to history, you will see that a lot of those people who handle some of those positions today as vice chancellors, as senators, as ministers, had free education where they even had free meals and all of that. But today they are unable to replicate the same privileges they enjoyed while they were in school, because it is that government that they've lost ideas on how to manage the educational sector, or they lack ideas on how to generate revenue, and they feel that the only way institutions can generate internally generated revenue is by increasing school fees, not recognizing that we are in a country with high rate of poverty, and the children of the poor need to go to school because the poor also need to breathe.
Dr. Adejo, I'll take you by your words. That if you think education is expensive, then try ignorance. I mean, that is no news. However, how do you even juxtapose, the inflation rates in the country, the spike or the surge in the prices of foodstuff and other essentials, to education and why it has become so expensive?
Okay, I think it's a simple mathematics or econometrics for those who are experts in economics. If I own a school and there are a lot of logistics I need to put in place, for instance, because of the cost of inflation in food, in transport, and all of that, occasioned by the removal of fuel subsidy and the inability of the political class to manage our commonwealth, it means that as the proprietor or proprietress, I'll need to increase the salaries of my staff. Because now what it took them hitherto to come to work by public transport, it has changed. For instance, the cost of transportation from Kubwa to Maitama used to be maybe around 200 naira. Now it's around 500 naira. For the cost from Kubwa to Area 1 is about 700 naira. And so a staff who lives in Kubwa needs to come to work in Area 1 or Area 3 will need around 1,500 naira just for transportation on daily basis. It therefore means that as a proprietor or a proprietress, I would need to increase their salary so that they can cushion the effect of fuel subsidy and the inflation that we're grappling with. And so if I do that, where will I get the money? The only alternative will be to increase school fees. For instance, you also have a bus that needs to take your people from maybe Area 1 to Wuse Zone 2, and before now maybe they were paying 20 or 50,000 naira for school bus, and now fuel has moved from 190 to 675 naira. You do not expect this proprietor or proprietress to retain the former price. Things will definitely change. And so what we are grappling with is a failure of the political class to manage our commonwealth, to manage the government, the country, and deliver good governance. And in most cases, it is the final consumer that will suffer this. Just as in the case of the price of food, also in the case of education, it is still the parents who will suffer this.
Well, Dr. Adejo, really there is so much here to talk about with a lot to take in. But I want a yes or no response if you can. Are you trying to justify, the hike in tuition fees in Nigeria? In a yes or no response?
For private institutions, yes. For public institutions, no. Okay.
Thank you very much. Now we understand that there is something called student loan that was actually, brought to the fore sometime last year. And we also understand that, there will be some sort of, final arrangement, I think on the 21st of this month. Do you even see the possibility of these student loans, addressing concerns around, the hike in school fees?
Okay, I am 110% skeptical about the student loan. I do not see the practicability and applicability of that policy. However, one would give the government a policy, give the government the benefit of doubt to see if that can be translated into reality. But as a public affairs analyst and as a political scientist with my knowledge on policies and governance in Nigeria, I am of the opinion that it's just one of those exercises that's going to be an exercise in futility. Now, the most mistake we make most times, or policymakers make it most times, is that they are reactive rather than being proactive. Do you need to give room for increase in the cost of living before you begin to bring a palliative that cannot even go down anywhere? It's trying to rectify the errors that your policies have caused. It doesn't look logical to me. Why do I need, for instance, to remove fuel subsidy and then try to now look for money to put in palliative to cushion the effect of fuel subsidy? It therefore means that the policy is not a good policy. And so what ordinarily one would have done would have been to put in place mechanisms ab initio the policy you want to bring. And so when people get acquainted with these mechanisms, you can now bring up those policies because the consequences of those policies wouldn't be felt. I give you an instance. I'm not a medical doctor, but the most times when you are giving Artemether and lumefantrine, they back it up with paracetamol because they know that there's a tendency for that anti-malaria to want to create some sort of headache and all of that. So there's a paracetamol attached to it. But what we do in government is to bring policies, and when people begin to suffer, you now begin to respond. And such response at the end of the day don't even amount to anything when you put it side by side the suffering that Nigerians are going through. How many students do we have in our public institutions that can subscribe to student loan? The federal government said they were going to pay 35,000 or thereabouts to government workers as palliative. As I speak to you, a lot of government workers have not received that money beyond once or twice. But the effect of the fuel subsidy removal is all been affected by people. And so most times our policies are either inconsistent or the policies are not well thought out at the initiation stage. And in most cases, these policies are reactive rather than being proactive. And I think that we need to begin to look at policies that are human-centered, policies that bear in mind the peculiarity of our people in relation to our economic conditions before policies will be brought forward.
Okay.
Not telling people to endure when people are suffering and you is asking them to endure, you are living, your family survives on government resources.
Dr. Dejo, apparently you are among Nigerians, who actually think that due diligence was not carried out before the president made that declaration May last year that we've gone past the fuel subsidy regime era. However, we understand the implication of the removal of fuel subsidy and how it has affected a number of sectors, if not all. But should the education sector be amongst the sectors that would also have to give excuses, just like, when I say excuses, no pun intended, but should the education sector also be on the list? I'm asking this question now because, you take a look at the level of crimes and criminality in our country today. It only boils down to the fact that if our children decide to drop the book and pick the gun, it will portend more danger for the country.
Absolutely. I think what we are seeing, like I said, the political system is a system. And in a system, the various subsystems function for the survival of the system. And so you cannot isolate a subsystem from the entire system because there's always going to be a spillover effect of a particular policy. The policy may not be intended to the educational system, but because the economic system is going into comatose, it will spill over and affect the educational system, the political system, the cultural subsystem, and all of this. It is impossible to isolate the educational system from the economic crisis that we're grappling with. If people are affected economically, then it will affect the educational system. But the implication is that, like you rightly said, if parents can no longer afford to send their children to school because of the exorbitant school fees they need to pay, even in public tertiary institutions, the implication may be an increase in in insecurity. Already the country is experiencing youth bulge, and so the ability of the state to manage the increasing number of youth is very important, because the future, the stability and instability of our country lies with the quality of the youth that we are producing. How far, how well are our youth doing in terms of education, in terms of sustainability, in terms of skill acquisition, in terms of entrepreneurship? All of these things will amount to the peace or insecurity that this country is going to experience in the nearest future.
Dr. Adejo, now the National Association of Nigerian Students and NANS, they've actually called on the federal government to take immediate steps to prevent fee increases and unfair policies in tertiary institutions in the country. First of all, let's get your thoughts, to this particular subject matter, where if a student is not able to pay his or her fee, then he or she, can't sit in for an examination. Is that a policy that should, can't be justified?
In the works of what was that now? In the works of a renowned journalist, he would say that is a satanic policy. That policy is not a fair policy. It's a policy that is targeted at ensuring that the poor are unable to acquire tertiary education, and the implication is grievous. If I run a school and I have students who cannot afford, to pay fees, and you do not allow them to sit for exam, maybe for first and second semester, and the student is able to eventually raise the money, what happens to the exam the student has missed? There are always points where people can account for this. Students could be allowed to write exams, proceed with their mates, but upon graduation, there's what they call clearance in our tertiary institution.
Right.
So you need to do clearance, and part of the clearance is that you are going to bring evidence of all your fees that you have paid before you can be given your certificate.
Right.
Not to deny a student from writing an exam, and the students who may eventually pay the fees but yet have missed the exam. What becomes of the fate of the students? Those are all policies that are not well thought out, and it's very unfortunate that even within the educational system, there's supposed to be a think tank, there's supposed to be a platform for generation of ideas. Things seems not to be working fine.
Okay, so as it stands, NANS, they've called on the federal government to, introduce or take immediate steps to prevent, these kind of harsh policies. What do you think the federal government, what would you suggest the federal government do, in this regard?
Okay, in the first instance, I do not believe in NANS as a pressure group. I see NANS, in my own personal opinion, as a group of people who use the platform of NANS as an opportunity for their own personal aggrandizement.
That speaks volumes, Dr. Adejo. It speaks volumes to say that.
That's my personal opinion.
Right.
I do not see NANS as a representative of genuine representation of the plight of Nigerian students. I do not see them as one.
Okay.
However, the government needs to be more focused. And if NANS must be seen as NANS in relation to the kind of NANS that we knew some years ago, some decades ago, then there needs to be sincerity of purpose. NANS have become politicized. I see a lot of people in NANS who call themselves students, who are supposed to be, grandfathers, in our society, now using the platform of NANS for whatever reason. All those things I do not see as good justification and as a good pressure group that can really put pressure on government to do the needful for our students. Where was NANS when all of these fees are being increased? It is one thing to portray an impression. It is another thing to act the impression, or to talk. It's one thing to say a word, it's another thing to walk the talk. The government needs to understand that over 80% of Nigerians are either poor or are below average. Therefore, if this country will be stable, their interests need to be protected. There's a need to integrate, aggregate the collective interests of the Nigerian people and see how everybody can achieve their interests within the confines of the law. If I want to become a professor or a medical doctor, the ideal thing is to go to school. But when people cannot go to school, you are forcing them to look for an alternative way to achieve their goals, which is not good. These are are part of the drivers of crime and criminality in societies. Education is the life wire of every society, and such it has to be given priority. Even though some persons will say education is a scam, that is a misgiving. Education is the life wire of every society, and priority should be given to it. In terms of budgetary allocation, education needs to be given that priority. This is very important.
Indeed, Dr. Adejo, I think a takeaway from the conversation would be that education is not a scam. So for some Nigerian youth who have normalized, that saying that education is a scam, you should please, look inward and have a rethink. Dr. Adejo Sunday is a lecturer and public affairs analyst. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you.
All right. And that's it for news analysis today. Thank you so much for watching. I am Omo, if a piece of Semere. Thank you.